So, dear participants of our roundtable, of our panel Motivation of a Modern Patient, I'm happy to welcome you here in our room, and I'm happy to introduce participants of our discussion. Can you hear me properly? Yeah, good. So, I have strange feelings related to the sound. So, Lena Shalev, Director of Practice of Healthcare Service, Boston Consulting Group, Alexander Aslon, Head of Foundation Public Opinion, Georgy Bakunov, Head on Technological Development of Yandex Company, Chris Bourne, Chief Specialist on Healthcare, Department of International Trade, Great Britain, Raisa Balotina, Deputy Chairs of Power Sberbank, Shavaliev, Chief Doctor of Tatarstan Republic Hospital, Bashankaev Badma, Chief Surgeon of GMC Clinics Hospitals, and Richard Kempens, Head of Innovative Programs on Precise Diagnostics, Royal Philips, Netherlands. Motivation of a modern patient. Oh, well, I believe that we are going to have a conversation about mutual expectations of a doctor and a patient. When we come to a doctor, what we expect? We expect that we will have a painless and efficient treatment, that we will be removed from physical and sometimes even spiritual problems, not very expensive, and ideally for free. And the doctor in return expects from the patient discipline, trust and gratitude, at least moral gratitude. There are different forms of this. And there is third part. There is a state which is interested for a doctor and the patients to agree between each other and create conditions for that, because this will be a win-win strategy. And here it's very important to track the changing moods, needs and opportunities of both sides, and we're speaking first of all about patients. So I believe that we'll have a lot of new information today. We'll share our impressions and maybe we'll solve some problems. Lena Shalev, Director on Healthcare Practice, BCG Company. Please, Lena, I know that you have a research about how a patient is changing in the world overall. These are global changes that take place faster than in any other time. Thank you, Evelina. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I hope the discussion will be lively. I know that it's a long day, but this is the theme, which is not about system, but it is about us, first and foremost. We are these very patients. We as BCG made a research as to the global trends. We have assigned it a patient 2.0. It's one of the key 5 trends. Within the frames of our research, we have analyzed 25 different cities, including Moscow, and within the frames of this topic, motivation of the patients, we'll share the key results. We all understand that modern patients becomes totally different. It's not a secret for anyone, as I believe. What contributes to that? On the one hand, it's quite clear. This is socio-economical development, this is digitalization, technologies, strengthening of consumer segment, service provision, and so on and so forth. Of course, we are different. What is the difference of a modern patient? Number one, this is large-scale awareness. 60% of citizens in the cities were analyzed use internet to find for information regarding health and treatment. On the one hand, it seems to be good, positive effect, but on the other hand, it happens so that a doctor spends 30% of his time during the examinations in order to explain basic information, and it looks like it could have been done by the patients themselves. But on the other hand, it creates huge challenge for healthcare system. Why? Because how we can make sure that a patient reads correct information in a good place? Further on, experts in 85 cities and towns mention clear trend for strengthening, and this is a very expressed trend, for more active participants of the patients in the treatment process. We'll discuss what is more active participation. This is the right to make a choice. This is a right to make a decision, and this is self-actions, self-performance of some procedures that that used to involve a doctor before. But on the other hand, there is another side. Well, at the background of availability of information, some of the patients show excessive requirements to doctors, to clinics, and also inclination to anxiety. So what happens? We come to the internet, we read different information from different sources, and far and away not always this information coincides, and we start being nervous. Others lose trust to healthcare system or neglect the system and prefer provide treatments themselves without complying with the assigned treatment. And I would like to get deeper into these key revelations of a new patient and to speak in more details about it. Well, speaking about awareness, we have made a simple experiment, having made two similar inquiries for the stomach cancer via American server and a Russian server. And if we see the results of Russian server's top 5 sources of information, which we see, these are links to private clinics and Wikipedia, no state or scientific source. And the same experiment via American server shows the top 5 of links to portals of the leading industry organizations and scientific editions. And trying to think about it, we understand that for the system there is a challenge how to understand that a patient reads what should be read in a good place. And with the example of the USA, the countries and cities can create and promote official thematic information resources. Speaking about the next level of awareness, access of patients to proven information. These are results of the treatment processes and analysis based on that. If you were at a plenary session, the representative of a World Healthcare Organization in Russia said a very correct phrase: healthy choice is easy choice, and if a person looked quickly and with the transparency of data could take a decision where to get cured, to which clinic to go, to which doctor to go. As we know, the results of the treatment is one of the central metrics for a value-oriented healthcare system. Regardless of the fact that out of the analyzed cities, in most cases we have ratings based on different figures. Only in 3 of them, I would like to attract your attention, only in 3 out of 20 we have ratings which are truly based on quantitative indicators of the results of a treatment process. Sweden, as an example, when they implemented the initiative, this new approach that the key metrics would be the result of treatment, clinics started to transform themselves because they understand that they have huge gap of treatment results between the doctors and clinics, and it's important to understand why it happens. Number 1, they started a cycle of transformation at the level of hospitals. Number 2, what they've done is that they've made this data public for patients, and publicity of this data gives to patients an opportunity that they are doing totally very well prepared decisions. And at this slide we see the increase of share of satisfaction of population. Another aspect that I would like to speculate in detail is involvement. We have identified 3 directions of involvement, if we can structure it like this. The first one, right to make a choice, decision taking, and participation in treatment process. As related to the right to make a choice, we have analyzed cities from the point of view of an opportunity to select a doctor, a hospital, and a medical device which is implanted to a patient during a surgery, for instance. Why this choice is important and necessary. Main motivation is increase of competition between clinics. It's quite clear if there is competition for a patient, then there is increase of quality of the provided services and level of services. And on the other hand, this is increase of responsibility of a patient for his health when he takes decision himself. And results can illustrate that in most of the cities considered within the frames of basic system, of healthcare, patients can select any therapist regardless of the place they live and any kind of hospital. And in this format, Russia and Moscow basically are the same as other towns, providing freedom of choice to the patients, preserving the frames, and actually helping to control in this or that way the allocation of load over the system. But if we consider an opportunity to make a choice, the third column, an opportunity to select medical item which is implanted to a patient during a surgery with a quota. And being a patient, if I want to replace my joint, and use the item of another company, I will have to not to use the quota. I will not have an option of additional payment, and this will be totally different budget and load over the patient. So we see that most cities still provide this kind of opportunity to pay additional money for patients, and in the cities where this possibility is not implemented, they just mentioned it as one of the limited factors that requires being changed. Now, as related to the decision making for patients, the culture of dialogue with the doctor, namely this culture of dialogue with the doctor, is an indispensable element. And here most of the citizens and patients emphasize the importance of this factor. But at the same time, when we consider figures, the research showed that in 50 analyzed cities, there is a paternalist model of cooperation of patient and a doctor. And I believe this is quite a big figure. Why it is important to shift to a new stage of partnership relations in conditions of dialogue and equal communications. On the one hand, the patient is more responsible and more compliant with the treatment, and also the level of trust to the doctor is growing and to the system overall. Thus, the treatment adherence is growing. Another thing I would like to mention as regarding involvement, this is a self-performance of some of the procedures at different stages of the treatment. This can start from prevention. And at the plenary session, we provided an example that 65% of Sweden population annually have self-screening at the cancer. And this can be at-home rehabilitation with remote programs where a patient communicates with the doctors on a remote basis, but at the same time controlling condition and providing information to a doctor. I'm not speaking about the fact that, we have too many gadgets which can tell us where to sleep, where to eat, when to walk, and so on and so forth, motivating us for some additional physical activity. Actually, in Europe, in the nearest 5 years, we forecast increase of the market of these gadgets by 15%, regardless of the fact that the market is already very well saturated. Another aspect of participation of a patient in a treatment process is related to an opportunity to data input. At a plenary session, we have touched upon a theme of a digital profile of a patient on the basis of a database. And one of the most important elements of establishing a digital profile is getting data about the health from patient himself. So number one, patient A has access to his data. Number two, he can implement additional information, and this can be related to medical stuff like allergy or some historic diseases, and also can be related to non-medical things which absolutely influence the health condition of a person, up to stress at work, divorce, childbirth, and so on and so forth. And until now, this opportunity is available only in 30% of cities. And here I would like to mention a huge breakthrough in Moscow. Recently, Moscow created a digital medical history available for medicine, and it's totally in trend from the point of view of involvement of the patient to participation and data provision and activation of a patient from the point of view of creating of this digital profile of a patient. At the beginning of our presentation, we emphasized increased requirements of a patient, how it can be explained. We are all citizens of big cities. We lack free time. We got used to have a large-scale choice of services and high level of service provision. This is a fact. We are spoiled with the service of service provision, and we spread these needs to other spheres, including medical service. Medical institutions respond to this requirement actually so that, well, actually, if we consider, lots of clinics create special departments which are responsible for service and for services to the patients and the providing of comfort and a seamless way of a patient within a clinic or a network of clinics. Regardless of this trend, that is development of new actively involved patient with high level of requirements, we know that there is a huge plus of population which is not active, who do self-treatment, who do not visit doctors, and so on and so forth. And still, there is a share of population who will never get that much activated. A low level of compliance with the recommendations of treatment, it varies from 30 to 50%. What cities do to activate motivation of our patients? First of all, they arrange a behavioristic hints and stimulus system directly addressing the citizens to make them more responsible. And this specifies, be it like flash mobs oriented to the mass participation with the awards, discounts, club cards. And there is also an example like using technological solutions to control digital receipts. So they have a network arranged so that they have a large network of clinics with the pharmacies integrated, and within their pharmacies they can monitor and track any kind of moving of receipts. And a patient is motivated to use the network of these pharmacies due to discounts, due to delivery services, and thus you can attract patient to your own network. And also today at a plenary session, Veronica touched upon a theme that we have lots of elderly behavioristic segment of population, and it's hard to understand how to activate these different people. And here cities go to segmentation of their population in order to understand how to do it correctly, which tools to use, what kind of messages to use to activate these or that segments of populations, be it aging population or young people who are working and who are pressed for time. In conclusion, I would like to say that a new role of a patient and his active participation is provision of availability of medical help and its efficiency. This is good for a patient, this is good for the system overall. The patient becomes totally active participant of this process and he starts managing his own health. But for bilateral profit, the state should also invest for patients to have sufficient opportunities, motivations, informations, and senses to participate in the process. Thank you. Thank you very much for this interesting presentation. And on the one hand, it's nice to hear that we are up to date and modern enough, but we also have problems typical of other countries. There's a very short question, Lena. Whom we look like and what countries we look like, and also what is the changes that we see in the world for such important criteria as the level of satisfaction of healthcare system and medical assistance which is provided to population.
Thank you very much, Evelina. I would like to start with the second question regarding the satisfaction level. It's very much linked to the question that I mentioned when I said that clinics, they reorganized their department just to focus more on the surface to monitor satisfaction level. If we talk about it generally, I would say that satisfaction level, satisfaction with medical assistance and quality is quite high. We didn't have city-to-city analysis, but according to some expert estimations, it is even though that is quite high, it's not that high that could made us be satisfied. So what about comparison? We are very much like big city. We are like big cities. Well, Moscow is not Russia. Russia is not Moscow. You know this saying, and of course it can be really seen. I mean the face that we have just. The image that we have just described. It's not just any Russian citizen. Now, we worked with 25 different cities that I mentioned, and there we worked with big cities. We took Asia, America, Europe. Okay, then tell me, have you ever seen a city where citizens were completely or really satisfied with medical service? Or at least more or less satisfied? We haven't analyzed it. I mean, that would be really nice to actually analyze the patient's moods further on and to have a more targeted approach to Russian patient Alexander Anatolievich. I would like to remind you that you are given no more than 10 minutes for your presentation. So we are talking about patient's motivation. But we need to understand what the word patient means and how we're supposed to motivate patients. These are two important points that we need to understand, and something that I'm going to cover in my presentation. So thinking about the patients, the meaning behind the word patient. Okay, if we translate these words, this is from Latin language, suffering person, and this is someone who is supposed, usually is, to get a medical assistance. So this is a sick person, and we should say patient is both about diseases and about health at the same time. That is why it's quite a tricky question, but this is someone who is very much preoccupied with his or her health, and here you can see this kind of double meaning that we can see, but we more or less understand what patient means. So a modern today's patient, for the sake of his or her health, takes some preventive measures to improve it with the help of medical specialists. So they take some preventive measures, or prophylactus from the Latin language, to prevent a disease. Prevention, it's not specifically just something related to the health, but this is some measures that you take in order to stay healthy for a longer time. It means that such people are quite cautious about their health conditions. They think about their lifespan, about the quality of life, and that is why they go for regular medical checkups. They are ready to interact with medical specialists, and in this sense, medical specialists act as a consultant if you talk about a medical checkup, or as a controller if you talk about diagnosis. The well-known models provided by the American philosopher Vich. He has contractual and technical models. I don't know whether you've heard about these models, but still you can see that these are kind of parallel things. Okay, so prevention of complications. There we have unhealthy patients. So these are patients who were found sick or ill after diagnosis. And such a patient tries to avoid further complications. And in this sense, we care about other aspects a little bit. We talk about his discipline, self-discipline, and his medical knowledge. In this case, a medical specialist acts as a partner, so they are supposed to act together, both the patient and a medical consultant, medical specialist, in order to find an efficient way out. out. And a sick or ill patient is the one who is trying to resist the disease. And it takes some patience, it takes some hope. And here the medical specialists work as a survivor, as a saver, sorry. And this is a little bit a different approach. So you can see the model, Vich's model here worked as a collegial one. He has collegial model where the medical specialist worked as a partner. Well, anyway, he has different models that used to describe different types of relations between the patient and between the medical specialist. But I'm trying to think about it from the functional point of view. We understand that patients' visions also allow us to motivate them, to interact with them in a certain way based on the specificity of their status as a patient and status of a medical specialist. And now I would like to say a few words about those patients, I mean non-healthy, unhealthy patients. I don't mean to say that they are not healthy right now, but I am talking about special questionnaires that were used for a survey, and we tried to project different situations on the patients. If, for example, you feel a little bit sick, and how would you react, etc. So, as a result, our respondents found themselves in a position of the so-called unhealthy patient status. So we had 1,500 respondents or interviewees. So the age census was 18 plus, and interviews were conducted in different cities and towns. So if you feel a little bit sick, are you supposed to immediately go to the doctor? 43% said no, and the self-treatment, 55% were in this favor of these options. And why do people sometimes prefer to resort to self-curing or self-treatment? Because there is a lack of trust in doctors. And why actually they proceed to it? Because lack of trust, 22%, it's very difficult to get there, 42%, it's very expensive, 13%, and too much self-confidence, 9%. But still, this is an outstanding question, and we need to understand if, for example, if they give a certain prescription from the doctor, 84%, 48%, as well as for the second option, 48%, they said that yes, sometimes it happens, so they deviate from doctor's prescriptions, and sometimes they say they always comply with the prescriptions. And why do they do that? Here you can see the reasons. Yes, lack of trust, 21%, etc. And finally, does the doctor's diagnosis cause any doubt? 55% yes, they have doubt, and 39% said no, they don't have any doubt. Why does it happen? Because sometimes they use internet to find an answer to their question, 18%, go to other medical specialists, 15%, or go to people they know, to relatives, etc., 8%. If we take three such questions, consist of two parts, and we calculate those groups that can be classified. The first one, non-loyal, where we have three features, 14% likely to be loyal, 23%, etc. So it's kind of analysis. As for non-loyal patients, 45%, it's not possible to establish relations with a medical specialist and to have partnership-based relations with their doctors. For 45% of them, it's not possible to establish this kind of partnership. And what should we do in order to have this kind of relations? Well, as for doctors, they must have certain partnership competences. And also in the community, we need to create a special image of these relations between doctor and patients, where it could be based on partnership. We need new approaches in order to change our mentality, our culture. And here, for example, at this website, zos.fom.ru, you can find more about different aspects and those things that were mentioned in my presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you, Alexander Anatolyevich. I think that we'll be able to go back to a presentation, but now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Gubes, who is here to present Yandex. So in both presentations, we made reference to internet sources and engine service. So Yana, for example, she compared Yandex and Google, and Alexander Anatolyevich talked about also different algorithm that can be used to analyze behavioral patterns both of patients and doctors. So I would hardly call it a survey, but Yandex conducts a number of interesting experiments related to health. But before I start doing that, I have just a short question for you. So while I was preparing here, I said, do you know there is a popular drug called levomethacin? It is antibiotic that is widely used in everyday practice by many people. So 1,041 people, starting from the beginning of the year, asked the following question: whether you can buy levomethacin and I can hear, yes, alcohol. You want to say alcohol, yes? Because, yes, it's a New Year's celebration, etc. And many people take alcohol, yes. So I decided just to use different search engines to find an answer. And the question answer was always correct. No, you cannot take it with alcohol. So you cannot take this antibiotic on alcohol. It was the case on the first and on the second page. But when you go to the third page, for example, both at the Yandex and Google, where one person says, I've tried that, I combined it and everything was fine. So, do you think what kind of, percentage of people looked at this question, at this answer? 20% of the users, they went to the third page because they instinctively, subconsciously, they wanted to say, yes, you can take this antibiotic with alcohol. So there are two categories of people. You know, we have medical specialists and patients. Patients, this is 100% of the population, and medical specialists just a part of the population. And everyone, when you are exposed to some medical issues, you want to hear the words, you are all fine, and at the same time feel as everything was really bad. Because when you go to some internet source, use internet engine, you usually go specifically for that. So they think that something is wrong with them, but they really hope to get a positive answer that everything is fine with them. I think that can also be applied to also other things related to different patient histories. It tells us a lot about patients' behavioral patterns, and if you dig deeper into that, you will find it's interesting to know that, yes, apart from these weird questions about levomethacin and alcohol, also there are some scary questions. For example, people have make the following queries. Probably you've heard it from you. For example, I have a bone sticking out of my leg. What am I supposed to do? Why do they ask such a question in the internet? Why don't they just go to a doctor, a specialist? And we first saw such a question. We tried to give them a professional answer. But if we have doctors here, you understand that it's not possible just to give any recommendations apart from just call somebody, a doctor, or just go immediately to the hospital. And it turned out when we looked at other sources, we saw that those people who came to this service with such a query, of course, we called an ambulance for them, etc. But after that, we still ask them why you decided to put a query in the internet of that kind. And they said, I wanted to know what I should do before I will be taken to the doctor. So this is a function that the modern healthcare system does not really perform very well, even in Moscow, even though that in Moscow we can see a real progress on that matter. I tremble to think and to say, but I think that in Moscow it is still way better than the rest of the country, and in most of the countries that I have been to, in Moscow you can get an answer to the question, what am I supposed to do before even an appointment with a doctor, just using some online services. And it shows that they want to find some information from various sources, and usually they use internet for that purpose. When we look at how such reference sources work, for example, Yandex, they account for 60% of all the queries. When they search for something, people, it means they do it via Yandex, 60% of them. We provide up to, tens of thousands of different consultations using our source and our platform. Even now, we can say that in Moscow right now. So, can you just imagine a typical hospital, and let's say that 50% of visit this hospital? How many of them approximately will go to a gynecologist? From 3 to 10%. Yes, so it so happens that in the service of telecommunication, this percent is way higher. Even in Moscow, it sometimes attains the threshold of 25%. Do you know why it happens? Because for many of internet users, it's still a very complicated moral, from the moral point of view, issue. So it means that patients, they don't really want to go to a medical specialist because it makes them go out of their comfort zone, and because it is a particular domain, even though that is just about their health. And they understand that the internet will just send them to the doctor, but still they want to give it a try and to find an answer in the internet. So I can really feel this barrier that prevents patients from going immediately to the doctor. It's also the case for me because even that I understand that I need to go to the doctor, I'm not quite willing to do that. For example, in my company, I forced one of our young female specialists to go to the doctor, and I just forced her to go there. And when she didn't want to go, I asked why, and she said, because I now feel more or less fine, better. She found it really stressful to go to the doctor, and I had just to push her to do that. And we, as internet companies, we also try to reduce this stressful thresholds. Yes. We also can conduct these consultations in a special way, just to say, for example, there is no scary about that. You shouldn't be afraid that we can give instructions and say that first you need to go to that doctor, or it's reasonable to go to that specialist. At the same time, statistics is a quite complicated thing, quite a tricky one. We know that out of the people who decided to use those internet queries and ask a question there, less than 5% after that go to a doctor. And out of the person who had those online consultations, 45% they still afterwards went to the doctor after such consultations. You can see that the difference is very dramatic. Why do I insist that teleconsultation is a good thing? For example, Yandex also can organize right now doctors with a real doctor, and you can communicate with the doctor via Skype, or as if you were just talking to each other. And in Mail.ru, for example, they also have special service called Doctor versus Patient, where you can chat with the doctor and address questions to him or her. On one hand, it allows to decrease the stress level, but at the same time, this is a very useful service to avoid this kind of concerns at the very beginning. And even though who are still stressed, if they use this kind of service, they still go to the doctor, which is really great. And if we took those gynecology issue apart, even though that's still, still want to share an example for you. We should say that our consultations, gynecologists, yes, we prepare special questionnaires, and some questions during consultations, they go. So even male patients, they come to such specialists because their wives doesn't want to go there, and so they ask some general questions. And well, actually, school was supposed to give you such answers, but unfortunately, during our biology classes, not so many information is provided for us, and that is why we select simple, basic information.
And if we consider general consultations, it will be seen that the most popular story in the internet related to health of people, and in the search and online consultations, mostly people ask about pediatrics, first of all about children. And this is the same problem. Well, we are concerned about children, but we really want to be told that everything is all right. The same story happens with cardiology. Most often people come to such services with questions like, well, I was walking to 8th floor and I have a high level of heart rate, whether it's normal or not. All these stories that I can tell you make me come to the same conclusion, that two modern problem of a patient is how to make himself to come to a doctor, the first part, and the second part is the same unexpected as the first one, unexpected in diverted commas, how to make a patient follow recommendations he received. And here what we have found actually correlates with BCG research, but in a very strange way. We're an internet company. We often make different polls as to the level of satisfaction, and our tests as to the level of satisfaction and what kind of medical service they received resulted in strange conclusion. There is no correlations between satisfaction and the quality of medical service exists. Well, why? Because a patient is not only in a condition of a patient, in a change condition, but he is also on adrenaline. What he can assess is how a doctor was smiling, whether it was clean in polyclinics, general experience from a medical service, but not the quality of medicine. And basically, we understand that the quality of medicine is different, but here we should understand that this kind of barrier goes directly for the level of consultation of a doctor. He heard something and then he is either satisfied or not satisfied with this experience. But there is a further part, which is called whether he is compliant with the recommendations of a doctor, how qualitatively he follows these recommendations. And here we see direct correlation. The higher the level of service is, the more a patient is satisfied, the more attentive he is following the recommendations of doctor. So we again come back to the need to increase the level of doctor's education and their ability to communicate with a patient. It's good for me. I'm not a doctor. I'm not comfortable to smile all the time. Well, but the doctor doesn't have to smile all the time. But if you remember doctors whom you think about that they are great, good, and they helped you a lot, almost all of them are smiling. And this is just a professional story. Good doctors are always with a smile. You understand? Because even if they inform you with some bad news, they're trying to do it with a smile. Just a moment, I'm going to conclude. Why I'm bringing you to a very strange idea about the quality of service? Because actually medicine, medicine, healthcare, as you have said correctly, is moving away from working with patients who have problems to patients who have no problems, who are healthy now. And for those, the quality of the service provided is of utmost importance. If you are diseased and you know that you feel bad, and first of all you are worried with the quality of a medicine, and if you believe that you are healthy, the most important for you is how the doctor was smiling at you, whether he was convincing or not. So the smile is a means to convince a patient. And basically, a doctor is smiling for you to listen to his recommendation. And we have such strange conclusions, and they are confirmed actually by lots of empirical observations that we had. And to be quite honest, when I tell this, I understand that I never told you anything new. You knew that as it is. It's great when our observations just confirm your knowledge. Or vice versa. With our actions, we confirm your observations. So your observations coincide to our observations as a medical TV channel, and I have a number of answers to your questions, whether you are saying that these are rhetorical questions. But however, a man asks a gynecologist about his wife because he doesn't want to go to a urologist to take his prostate, and vice versa. 100% I can tell you no. But then we have different opinions. So in our consultations, no, because the consultations of urologist and then to go online for online consultations to a urologist, especially with the video switched off and with text preferably, but not with a voice, is not a problem for a patient. No, but I mean that he is not going to deal with his health right now. He is dealing with the health of his wife. But you know, more often the problem is normally of a gynecological character and taboo diseases, so-called, which we do not want to speak about. By the way, the Forum of Sociologists, not so long ago, there was a list of made by one of the sociologists. There were but for coloproctology, and we have coloproctologists here. I believe he will share his observations. And there they had a flu as well. So a disease which people are ashamed of, and people are ashamed of going to a doctor and speak about this flu. And as related to pediatrics, this is stress to a mother. Whether you need to go to a doctor, the doctor will tell you why you came here, or why you want to place your child into contagious environment, and heart attacks come unexpectedly, and there can be symptoms which disorient a patient. And let's move on, and I'm happy to give the floor to Chris Bourne, Chief Specialist on Healthcare of International Trade Department in Great Britain, and we are very interested in knowing the experience of Great Britain.
Evelina, and I think it's interesting that Greg has set up the competition really between the general internet and expert clinicians. So let's see how we can address that. I mean, just a reminder about why we're doing this. I mean, we want to motivate patients because we want them to seek help, to recognize they've got a problem, to take the treatment, to comply with the treatment, to do the rehabilitation and look after themselves. And we also want staff to be motivated, our personnel to be motivated. Motivated patients means motivated staff. And of course, if patients do stick to the treatment plan, it will save cost as well. So there's a good reason for motivating patients. But I think, as we said at the beginning, Liana said at the beginning, that of course we know that every single patient is different. And that's the huge challenge that, let's take this off, that's the huge challenge that we have to. And first of all, I do apologize. I'm having to speak in English, not Russian, so apologies for that. We do have to recognize the differences. I mean, even if you just take age differences, you know, how you treat an older person with long-term conditions is very different. And that they're at home, say, is very different from treating a child in a hospital. It's just obvious. But actually, there's a whole range of differences. And I think this is the real challenge that comes with motivation. But I think someone else mentioned too that we do need to, I think for a patient, for any of us to feel motivated, we need to be in charge. We need to have some control over our own healthcare. And I think that is certainly something that we're trying to do. Of course, people need support and advice in taking control, not just to be left on their own. But things like in the UK, you can get a choice of hospital if you are referred to a hospital. You're getting increasingly personalized treatment plans, increasingly based on your genetics, but also on your preferences. We're training staff much more now to look at the person and what they need, not just the illness and what that needs. And we're trying to give much more attention to people with long-term conditions so they can manage their own care. So the management of diabetes, the management of asthma, all these different long-term conditions, how can they look after themselves much more? How can they help rehabilitate themselves more? And I think the other thing is to provide more channels. I mean, we've got the internet, but we've also got in the UK a 24-hour telephone service that you can get immediate advice from, and if necessary, a referral on. We've also got a very good NHS, National Health Service website that people trust. So it's trusted information and people can go to that. That's just one, instead of going to the internet as a whole, go to the trusted site, which is www.nhs.uk. So I think we're trying to find ways of getting people the information they need and the support they need to manage their own health and take control. But as well, of course, we're trying to encourage people to become healthier. So taking control of their health as a whole. And that includes recognizing that, for example, people who smoke often have an addiction and will need a lot of help. And our stop smoking services that we have in primary care are showing that if you use that advice, you're 4 times more likely to stay off the cigarettes. So trying to provide those sorts of supportive services. Weight management's another example. I mean, up to now we've been offering stop smoking services just in primary care, but now we're going to offer it to all hospital patients as well. And then things like the NHS Diabetes Prevention Programme, which apparently is the biggest prevention programme in the world, and that's designed for people who are at risk of getting diabetes, really concentrating on their lifestyle and how they can prevent themselves falling into diabetes. So that's just a couple of examples. I think the other thing, we've talked about smiling, and that would be nice if that was the only answer, and it is a lot of the answer. We know that, the so-called non-specific factors in clinical interaction, and smiling makes a big difference. But it's more than that, and I think every clinic and every hospital requires fantastic leadership. And we talk a lot about clinical and managerial leadership in healthcare, but the hospitals that provide a really accessible, personal, effective service are the ones that motivate their patients. So it's quite a simple answer, really. Provide a fantastic service and people will be motivated to follow the treatment and to make themselves better. And I think if we take the best hospital we've currently got in our country, which is in the northwest of England, we can see fantastic leadership there, someone who's just been given an award for her leadership, but including within that is a culture of patient safety, a patient focus, a culture of quality in every bit of care that is given, huge staff engagement, so every member of staff feels they've got a role in making this a fantastic hospital and service, and that means the morale is high. And also recognizing that this issue that everyone is different. People walk into the hospital, certainly in the UK, many people are from very different backgrounds, very different experiences, very different ages, and needing very specific responses to their individual needs. So the inclusion of everyone in the response you give them. There's no one that you would discriminate against. And finally, as well as being safe for patients, it has to be safe for staff. I mean, staff do get threatened in hospitals and in casualty departments and so on. So making it safe for the staff is critical too. And this particular hospital has got a fantastic strategy to try and make sure it's always improving the value of the care they have. And they use regular audits, they use a special accreditation system for all their wards to make sure they're high quality. They welcome anyone to come and have a look at what they're doing and take feedback. They take patients into the board meetings to hear what the patients think of the care, etc. So I think this issue of leadership is critical. I think in the UK we have about 9 different channels whereby people can give feedback to the service, and I think that's really important, not just to hear feedback, but to really listen to it. And one of the examples we have is what we call a friends and family test. You see it in the hotels, you see it in the restaurants. It's the same one. It's a simple question. And have you had a good, what's been your experience of the service? And you can do follow-up questions as well. It's now, I think, the largest amount of patient feedback in the world. Sorry to keep saying that. I think we've got 65 million responses so far, and it's rising by over 1 million a month. So that's been really important and gives a lot of feedback which people act on. So I think that's been another way that people become motivated because they feel they're listened to. So smiling's important, but listening's also pretty important. And I think we've also touched on throughout today the digitalization of healthcare. And I think for many people, and especially the tech-savvy people, maybe mainly younger, but not only, people who want to use the technology. These are fantastic to motivate people to get help. So whether it's a GP consultation through an app, whether it's testing through taking a photograph of your skin, whether you've got the risk of skin cancer, whether it's a cancer app that can tell you your risk and therefore whether you should go straight to diagnostics, you don't bother seeing a specialist, you go straight to diagnostics if you're at risk. Or a case management app we've got, which that issue of motivating people to do the follow-up, they get monitored, they get advice, they get encouragement to do all the things they need to do after being diagnosed, say, with hypertension, but also the clinician is told when some of their patients are at high risk and need to be recalled quickly to be given more help. So there's a lot of ways in which the digital management detection and management and rehabilitation can be done. And we have many interesting examples. I saw earlier, the session earlier had a robot here. I thought it was meant to be me at one stage, but apparently it had a robot here. And some of the robots as well are engaging people, particularly older people maybe, who are on their own more, to not only be socially active, but also to monitor their own health. So I think there's a lot of excitement about the possibilities with digital systems. Lastly then, what do we do really overall, I think, to motivate people in the UK? I think clearly I've mentioned national policy, national programs. I think advances in digital and also personalized medicine. I mean, it's going to be fantastic to be able to say, I know that you will benefit from that drug, but you won't. That's just a fantastic ability. At the moment, geneticists say that with cancer drugs, we know that half the people do not benefit from a cancer drug. It's just that we don't know which half. But we're getting to the point where we will know which half, and I think that'll be fantastic for the patient as well as for the costs of the system. Local leadership and staff training is necessary, and patients' involvement in the design of care pathways. And I think the whole idea is to say this care, this treatment is something that's just for you, that's right for you, and I'm going to support you to manage your own health. I'm going to make it easy for you to access that help and treatment. Now, trouble is, how does we get a hospital or a clinic to do this? And I think that's sometimes the challenge. And I guess in the UK it's a mixture of the carrot and the stick. So just finishing off now, the carrot, the stick is performance management and regulation, but the carrot, actually it's not money, it's glory. And we do find that people love being considered the best hospital in the country and love working in the best hospital in the country. So there's something about the reward that brings. And does it work? In short, we find it does work. It produces better outcomes to have a motivated patient. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Both. Thank you for sharing this interesting experience. But I suspect that there is huge difference between a Russian patient and a British patient. And for us, we already understand that it's kind of brand, because British patients are very aware. They are ready to trust and establish partnership relations with the doctor. Larisa Balotina, who is a deputy chair of Moscow Bank, and please, you have the floor. Health of Russian people, health of your clients is already in focus of a largest Russian bank. What it will result in, which products will you be ready to offer, and which are your observations? So, well, I will divide my speech into two parts. The first part, I'll speak about our experience of working with clients. I don't know to what extent I can compare. And you have services that you provide to clients which are related to their life. And here, the level of satisfaction of their needs and satisfaction of the clients who use bank services that we provide. If we could compare, probably yes. If not, then I will tell you what are peculiarities. And number two, I will express my personal an idea of a patient who is going to medical institutions, what I face and what I would like it to have. So I will speak about some possible future. Speaking about a Moscow bank, we work with 10 million clients. Mostly they are people in Moscow, and we understand that today clients' behavior is changing depending on region. What are the needs of Muscovites people? First of all, this is speed, this is quality, and this is time, and they're not ready to spend time to listen to consultations of our staff. They need, well, as you know, in the morning you have chairs, in the evening you'll pay money for those. So this is the concept of their life, and this is a result of our crazy rhythm of life in Moscow. And we came to conclusion that depending on what kind of region and what is the client base, then the quality and speed of service provision should be different as well. This is conclusion number one. Conclusion number two, if we speak about competitive environment, then basically a competitive environment makes like three aspects. These are processes, products, and our stuff, no matter how strange it can sound. And what was mentioned by the colleagues, that you leave being happy even if you didn't get a consultations, but you got a smile from a doctor. So approximately the same happens in the offices of a bank. Even if you didn't get an answer to your question, even if you didn't get the product or the process looked too complicated for you, if you were treated with a smile and with some empathy from a representative of a staff who provided some service to you, you leave with an understanding, then possibly not everything was good and you are not totally satisfied. However, this kind of taste from the bank becomes good. We have ordered huge number of researches, and we were thinking about how, what kind of services, what kind of products we should promote in different channels. And I would like to provide a couple of examples for you to understand basically what is the category of clients that asks for our services today. Basic three channels with which Sberbank is cooperating with clients. Number one, this is digital channel. I'm not going to tell about Sberbank Online. You know about this, and I believe lots of you use that. Number two, our offices. And number three, information that can be provided to clients is a website. And we have implemented lots of products into the three channels because we understand that clients are different and the way of communication with the bank is also different for them. And the product that we have recently launched at our website is a virtual card. We expect it to have main demand from young people who value their time, and that is taken very they have good idea of internet. They know information from the community. They know what is good and what is bad, and when they have some needs, they already have this need expressed. But we were really surprised when main recipients of these clients were not students. We made a research and we tried to understand why actually the audience that we have accounted for, we were not successful with those, and we found out that students are not ready to make a choice and be responsible for this choice. It's easier for them to come to our office.
And also to do it a little bit differently, they want the representative of Sberbank to decide what kind of product they really need. On one hand, this is an opportunity to get their personal access, but some kind of an autonomy. But at the same time, they are not really willing to take on responsibility. So another thing is that in many cases, anyway, a number of products, a number of services, in order to have this internal consultation, to have real consultation with the real representative of Sberbank. They are ready to use our remote channels, but such products as, for example, mortgage, yes, patients, they usually get it once in their life, and they are ready to buy it only during personal consultations because they want to discuss all the details, they want to look straight into the eyes of Sberbank representative, and this is one of the particularities of our buyers that go to a bank in order to pick a product that they want. If we talk about our steps, what we do in this domain, of course, we conduct different studies and service. We work with a lot of data, and our customers they really want to have some targeted offers, starting from the moment when they purchase something up to every step that is involved in interaction with the bank. And we need to take and consider all the possible process, etc. But it's not what the future belongs to. We need to think in future how this partnership is established between the bank and the buyer, and the more quality there is in this domain, the better it will be for a company that wants to survive in the future. Speaking about my personal attitude, or I would say personal attitude of patients, depending on the age, my interaction with medical establishments can also vary, and the channels of interactions they might also vary. For example, when I was a kid, just could be exposed to some medical checkups, and there were no expectations or fears. But now I want medical establishment to provide me with some information regarding some new studies that are organized and conducted about the most dangerous diseases or some symptoms that I should pay attention to. I really want to get some information with the help of my remote interactions with such a hospital, etc., that could help us to give me some tips in terms of my health. But as for this partnership between patients and medical establishments, this is a bilateral process. And of course, inevitably here we talk about a culture that starts in your family and attitude to your lifestyle habits and discipline and your responsibility for your own health and health of your relatives. So if you try to sum up and if just I try to outline the main message, then I would say that we need to have some targeted special offers, individual offers for customers. Well, I think that we and medicine, we go hand in hand together here. But as for my personal attitude, I find it really important. Thank you very much, Larissa. So once you agreed to be a patient during this session, then I think that we should try to go through some questions that we wanted to test. So do you use any search engines or internet when you feel pain some part of your body, or do you immediately go to a doctor? So, if we talk about some light respiratory diseases, of course, I usually use internet because just like any Muscovite, I don't have that much time to go to a doctor immediately. If we talk about a planned or scheduled checkup and special things, I mean, very important, then I would say that I'm a disciplined person and I go for such a medical checkup once in a year. So here are my actually expectations coincides with information that is provided by the doctor. So I just go there and I have no fears, and I mean, I interact with them, and it takes certain discipline to do that. Okay, and another question. What about your satisfaction level? Is it really important for you to see a smiling doctor? Well, the trust credit is very important, something that I expect from a hospital, and what I get in the end of the day, it's really important that there should be a certain coincidence. I want to keep this trust in this medical establishment after my visit to the doctor. It's really important. I want them to meet my expectations, but it doesn't matter whether the doctor is smiling at you or if they are very strict, etc. Of course, it's more pleasant that they smile at me. Yes, I just wanted to say I would really suggest, even if you have just a minor respiratory disease, you still need to go to a doctor, because we don't have any medical background and we cannot say whether this is just a light disease, some kind of infection, or a real disease. And also we have a possibility to have some online consultation, which has a more solid basis, like I said. No, people really don't understand that it's just like 1/10 of a real visit to a doctor. It's something that could give you some tips, some information, so that you can avoid some problems afterwards. 10 years, you'd better waste a day rather than to have a lot of problems in future. Well, I should say that we also had some certain practice experience when we were selling dog. We had quite a real demand for that during the summertime. Very interesting insight. So people, they tend to buy dog, I mean the service dog, for their relatives who were spending time with their kids in their country house, and they found it really important to get such a service. So we are just living in a big city. We sent our children so that they can spend their time with their grandparents, etc. they at the same time can get an injury or get sick, etc. And in this sense, doc is a real assistant. It is a great help when an aged person sits at such a country house. You don't have to go anywhere if you have a problem or you have some symptoms, you or the kids, and you can get a primary consultations. What are you supposed to do, because you are quite a distance from the city, and it is really important. That was meant mostly for more progressive part of the population, like we say, but it turned out to be quite know-how. Yes, we also gained certain experience. At one of the TV channel, we organized a telemedical program where people could call us, I mean, someone from our audience, and if they were not satisfied with our answer, we offered them to go to one of the telemedical resources to get a telemedical consultations. So over 500 people tried to reach us within an hour, and I mean, it's not just about the price or about the time. They were not quite disappointed. Out of 500 people, only 10 then used this service after communication with us. Why? Because they say that when we see a doctor on TV, they think that telemedical programs, this is of a certain meaning to them. When they saw a person with their own eyes, even in TV set, they trust it a little bit, but they don't use the other service. And I would say that many people think that telemedicine is something fake. It's like we say, we used to have such a figure, Mr. Kasperovsky, who made some prognosis, you remember, on TV, and we have two interesting curves here. One curve shows this dependence between how medicine is important for a person is dependent on your age, and we know that it grows up, and at the age of 50 you start to understand that you are an aged person already, and you very often feel quite bad. And another curve is about understanding modern technologies and how much you actually use the modern technologies, and it's quite a reverse, quite a curve. Well, at least it was the case up until now. People up to the age of 65, they almost knew nothing about internet, but it's no longer the case. It lasts at least this year, and now people over 35, 45, 55, etc., they know how to use internet, and they really want to use it, but not just they want to use it, but because they have to use internet. And if you look at the more aged people after 60 or 70 years, almost all of them can use Skype because they just want to communicate with other people. It's also the case in the sphere of telemedicine, and we can really see it. We can see this intense growth, this autonomous, very solid use of internet by aged people. So it's more about providing offer. Yes, we need to shape it and to make it absolutely transparent. I think that apart of people who on one hand feel sick but don't want to get any telemedical consultation, it will be shrinking in size, really, and it's not something that substitutes a real visit or appointment with a doctor. Yes, first there should be a real, yes, a visit should be anyway. Now, I understand at least what our legislation provides for, but even before an appointment with a doctor, people prefer to go to us, to come to us, and just to get some primary consultations to what the doctor should go. Rafael Shevalev, one of the heads and responsible for the clinics in Kazan. When we talk about these approaches, we think about Kazan as well, apart from just Moscow, because you also have some progressive approach there. Yes, I'm that smiling doctor who is supposed to diagnose, to understand, to find a solution, and to give all the possible recommendation. It's quite paradoxical because on one hand we have the same patients, so we all can have pain in the stomach, headache, etc. And 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we had the same patients. On the other hand, right now patients are more intelligent. They really value their money, their time. From this perspective, patients are a little bit different, and their vision is very much based on the fact whether they will get high quality services. If you go back to the theoretical part, the quality of the process, the quality of the resources, the staff, and the final results is really important. I agree with Chris from the point of view that you should be able to manage expectations, because if you don't really know how to measure expectations, if you don't know how to react to expectations, we won't be able to really use these medical services to satisfy our patients, and satisfaction should always be higher than expectations, and it's very not always easy to do that. At the same time, we should say that we have different groups of patients. As for kids, there is always an intermediary between these kind of patients and the doctors. They are not always able to express their complaints, etc. That is why the quality of the information that you collect very much depends on the intermediary. It's really nice if there is a mother responsible for that, who knows a lot about the kids, our grandmother, but yes, we need kind of a mediator. If we have such a mediator as mother, then it's nice. But if, for example, it's a student or somebody of that kind, the data collection could not be of such a high quality. And also there are people who can take antibiotics in an uncontrollable way, which is really bad. And sometimes people do not even notify doctors about that. And sometimes it so happens that even young girls and ladies come to gynecologist for the first time ever, and they are already pregnant because there are no mediators and they are not ready to take care about their daughters and don't know how to provide them with certain information. And it's very often the case. But if you start to understand that your future very much depends on your health, if you take more responsibility, and we teach our men to do that, if they understand that they should care about their health in order to support their family longer, then it will also could have a very positive impact. We want to live long and without any diseases, but we have quite an issue with comorbidity. I mean, this is a number of chronic diseases in the patient, and it's more and more often the case. We need to have a certain kind of transformation. I agree with a big number of participants, but the most important thing is that we need to change our mentality and the medical community in general. But do we really ready to comply with the requirements that our community has? Well, that is the question. On one hand, it's medical community or medical specialists are quite pushed by two very hazardous factors. On one hand, we want to live and to get all the necessary assistance, and on the other hand, we understand that technologies they sprawling around in big quantities, and we need to remember about that and to apply them when possible. What kind of innovations are we supposed to use? What technologies are the most important ones? We need to have an open dialogue in all the directions because it takes all the participants to come up with this transformation processes. We must stay objective, must be aware of our needs and understand how to manage different processes. We have a colleague here from Набережные Челны, a city in Russia, and he is one of the heads of a medical organization that for the first time ever they were exposed to GCI certification, and we asked ourselves the following question: are we ready to meet patients' expectations? But we decided to pick a different strategy, safety strategy, and it includes a number of rules, special strategies, etc. And we need to identify those incidents that also occur in our life. 1 in 10 patients states that state that medical establishment does not fully correspond to his or her expectations, and we reveal at least one non-conformity. I'm not talking about a doctor's error. No, I just some non-conformity that are spotted within such medical organization, and we need to change the situation. And it all starts with us doctors, and we should be able and willing to take on a certain level of responsibility for that. I'm ready to answer any question that you might have on that matter. And the main one that we have today, quite a rhetorical one, is when we will switch from the industry of diseases to the industry of health, when we will be able to get a really healthy patient during an appointment, so that we can state with satisfaction, you are absolutely healthy, live long and stay happy. I hope that by that time, I mean very soon, we will manage to achieve this goal.
Спасибо.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing your dream, first of all. And number two, thank you for this high level of your requirements to your profession and to your colleagues. Mr. Bashankayev, and if we are speaking about motivation of a patient, how can we motivate a patient? Do you mean that we should have like triple efforts? How do you see the solution to this problem? Good evening, dear friends. I see lots of faces I know, and you know perfectly well, and I do hope that you know perfectly well, that there are 2 oncological diseases which can be totally prevented. This is not a lungs cancer, this is cervical cancer and the intestine cancer, and these 2 cancers, these can totally be eliminated on the earth. Working in oncoloproctology from 2000 something, Asians just look young, but we're old. Actually, I just color my gray hair, and I was surprised with one thing. We know that this disease can be totally eliminated with a simple procedure of colonoscopy and a blood test that can bring us to colonoscopy. But however, I never see lots of hands to my answer. Who made colonoscopy? Well, all my dear friends, and I can call them my colleagues. I see reposts and so on and so forth, and this question actually puzzled me. I'm tired of speaking about colorectal cancer. As you know that you are going to sleep, and you walk and you slip and fall down. So to what extent you have to be uneducated and not to understand the practice of this thought? How we started doing this? We started speaking with a smile. A smile on your face, a smile on the face of a doctor was mentioned by everyone here. When you come to a proctologist, and it's a little bit harder than gynecologist, and as my colleague from Yandex mentioned, well, it's quite strange to be a proctologist. You know, it's kind of a shame. Professor Mantarov said, Professor Mantarov, plastic surgeon, wow, what a wonderful person. Can I hold you for a while? And I will be blessed. And if you speak about proctologist, and we're old friends, we know each other very well, and he is treating me well. But initially they asked me, have you washed your hands? And so my profession requires a very, very careful understanding of human psychology. And possibly after psychiatrists, we are the most tender people, because until now it's not fashionable to go to a proctologist, and it's not in trend. I've never seen anyone in Sberbank some recommendation go to proctologist, and this is going to be changed because more and more people with whom I'm friends, and we make a wonderful conference in Kazan, in Krasnodar, and in Moscow. Lots of people understand that proctology is not a square face and come here, remove your pants, bend down. No. It's a more delicate profession. It's very similar to venerologists to some extent, or extracorporeal fertilization specialists, when you have to feel the psychology of a person. Social networks have to be used carefully and actively, because this is our target audience. Facebook, where we have people older than 25 or 30 years, where they read about this. And these people started thinking about their health. And these people are very well oriented. They are less than 8% or 10% of young population of the country, but they are influencers. They are always a little bit more clever than others. And they are being listened to, and we have to work with these people. And we speak logically and simply. If this cancer can be prevented, it should be done. And the main thing is that if it's not related to you, just take care of your parents, because at this age there is an idea about thinking about your parents, that they brought you to this world, they helped you to get educated, they gave you a car and a flat, so you must also give something in return. And complicated situation with oncology can always be softened without a tragedy in your voice, so you are going to die tomorrow, and so on and so forth. But this requires either special skills, which can be received at different special courses, or some internal. I'm from a family of doctors, and my conversations on Sunday with my fathers were rare, but they are so strong that my brother just lifted and left us, and the sister said, without us. So for us, this kind of communication should be brought in a very simplified way. Do not complicate it. How to put it? Well, a task of a clever person to speak about complicated things in a simple language, and we're striving for this. And I see that there are my colleagues among the audience who are journalists who interviewed us. I'm trying to use simple words to describe complicated problems, and I'm happy that I'm not alone. I'm no longer alone. Half of the people here whom I know already made a colonoscopy. Somebody sent their friends here, and if the result of our session will be that you go to colonoscopy or send your friends or acquaintances, that would be great. I hope I haven't spent too much time, so invite your friends to make such wonderful sessions. Thank you. Well, you have not said how to prevent the second kind of cancers that you have mentioned, the cervix cancer. We have 85 countries in the world. We are going to have 4-valent. Well, cervix cancer is of virus etiology, and vaccination for boys and girls before the start of their puberty, 12 years vaccination, 4-valent or 9-valent. 9-valent we do not have yet, but we are going to have this, and that will decrease the risk at least by 63%. Can you imagine? It's very simple. You just make a vaccination and forgot. In Finland, they have eliminated cervix cancer by 95%. Finland and Russia, can you compare? So we're really worried. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm very grateful for you to listen to me. Well, thank you, Barbara Nikolaevich. And let's check how efficient you were after 1 year when you come back and ask the audience who made colonoscopy. If we have more people raising their hands, then you are successful. So, Richard Kankers, Head of Innovative Programs of Diagnosis Royal Philips. Please, Mr. Kankers, your speech. And today, well, we can keep track of our health, and we have lots of technologies to do that. And I believe that cell phones of most of us will tell a lot about our health, much more than doctors can do. It's enough to see our physical activities. Biomarkers are also present in applications. In Sberbank Online, we also have expenses for medical purposes, which is also a good indicator of health conditions. So, Mr. Kankers, how we can use patients' data and involve them into control of their health? Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Evelina. Thank you for the opportunity to make some comments here on behalf of Philips. I hope I'm audible. I indeed represent Philips Healthcare, and you can actually go to the next slide, please. So, Philips obviously is a medical device company, but I would like to point out that we're not only providing medical equipment. Already for quite some time we're much more engaged in, let's say, the entire care path of the patient, going from promoting healthy living through primary prevention, secondary prevention, taking the patient through the diagnostic and treatment process, and then of course focusing on the home care aspect. That is very relevant, of course, since we all need to focus on value-based care, driving down the cost while improving outcomes. So we very much subscribe with a quote here saying that a patient really is a very much an underutilized resource in the entire healthcare path. Next slide, please. I just wanted to make a few comments on the overall trends that we see related to access to care that influence the patient. Every year we embark upon a very detailed analysis on overall trends, and these are some of them are relevant for patient care, and many of them were touched upon already, so I won't repeat what was already said, but let me try to make a few comments. So first of all, we recognize that the patients are more and more behaving as consumers, so they expect an experience and also services like they do, and they are in the consumer domain. And so this is of course something to reckon with for the healthcare authorities, for professional care providers, and the like, and for companies like ours. We also see the advent of retail clinics coming up, competing with the professional care organizations. And then there's the aspect of care confidence, where definitely there is a growing digital divide that was already mentioned a few times between the people who are very digitally savvy. It doesn't need to be the youngsters only, but also the older people, and the people who don't. So I think we all should take a responsibility to improve the transparency of care options, try to objectify that, and also then indicate what the implications are for cost related to those care paths. And then, as pointed out in the middle, the health beliefs. Yeah, there's a lot of debate about trust and who to trust, and yeah, I think it was mentioned a few times already that indeed, especially the millennials seem to be telling their phones much more than their doctors. So this is really yeah, a big issue, of course. And how to increase trust, I think I would like to come back to yeah, improving transparency overall. Okay, next slide. So then I brought a few examples of how we are trying to engage patients with the solutions that we either have brought to the market or that we are working on as we speak. So the first example here is Vital Health. Vital Health is a part of the company that provides a patient portal, a patient information portal that provides personalized information for the patient, populated by the healthcare provider. So it's an interaction mechanism between healthcare providers and patients that have already, as you can see, onboarded quite a few patients, and would improve, let's say, the information sharing and also the transparency of information that is needed for those patients. not only during the diagnostic process, but also, let's say, during treatment, so patients can monitor their progress and so forth. Next slide, please. Here's another example in a completely different domain, in the domain of radiology. In fact, a specific case for MRI, where we have implemented a camera system that monitors the patient continuously, checks their breathing pattern, for example, and that helps to coach the patient through the entire procedure. It can also monitor the heart rate and other physiological measures. The idea is that you focus on the patient and the patient behavior and to help coach the patient for the best outcome. And indeed, the overall outcomes improve. It not only reduces costs, but also improves the quality of the imaging results. Next slide, please. So building on that, we are specifically focusing on pediatrics and the care for children, especially in educating children before they actually get an MR. So we are developing a so-called Kids app, where children already at home are being prepared of and being trained for the procedure that they're going into. So this actually has resulted in quite some positive impact, not only on the imaging results, but also on the level of sedation that is required then for these children while having an MRI. That of course translates then immediately to much lower cost and a shorter stay in the hospital overall. And I think it's also important to point out that this is not only relevant for children, for pediatrics, but definitely also for adult patients, especially elderly, who cope with some of the same issues as children during these type of scans. Okay, I'm trying to be concise here, so please go to the next slide. So the last example that of patient engagement, of a new way of offering solutions, is actually a collaboration with Charité Hospital in Berlin that has now expanded to many other hospitals, where we focus on reducing delirium for patients in the critical care setting, in the ICU. As many of you know, I assume, is that many patients actually suffer from delirium while in the ICU due to many factors, due to the fact that, first of all, the ICU is not necessarily a healing environment. It's very often very loud, very noisy. People are typically heavily medicated and so on. So what we've introduced here is a light therapy or a lighting system that manages the circadian rhythm of the patient. So basically sort of provokes their day and night rhythm, and that appears to be having quite some positive results for these patients, with severe reduction in delirium in these cases. So these are just a few examples of things that we're working on in terms of improving patient experience and patient engagement. We believe that this is a very critical topic. We should share much more information, not only industry, but also healthcare providers, insurance companies, and governing bodies. So I would like to leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Спасибо большое. Thank you very much, Mr. Kemkers. I am very grateful to all the participants. I am very grateful to all the participants of discussions and the audience. So each of us will be able to choose what kind of patients you would like to be: a healthy patient, an ill patient, and the first option, well, not a healthy, but something in between. And everyone chooses a doctor, whether as a partner or as a teacher, whatever. Here are different options. I do wish you good health. I would like to help you to expand this territory of trust between patient and doctor, and see you again. Thank you.